All right, lads. Good morning. We are recording. How you doing?
How you doing, Dan? Great to be here.
Doing good. All right. So first up, a little housekeeping. Uh, Lauren isn't here, I'm afraid to say. She's out with her friend. They had a play date yesterday, and she ended up staying out over at their house. So I am flying solo. I have no idea what the input from her would have been. Probably something she would have seen David's screen and she would have tried to read that word backwards to begin with, and it wouldn't have made any sense to her. But now you flipped it the right way round. So I'll do the job of asking a 13-year-old's question, and that goes to you, David. What is musket?
Awesome. Thanks, Princey. Yeah, look, thanks for the invites. It's great to be here. So Musket is a Bitcoin first payments business. I say Bitcoin first because we cover debit card, credit card, all kinds of transactions that you would normally process in your fiat life. So our mission overriding everything else is to drive the adoption of Bitcoin, first and foremost in the UK. But as regulatory licenses and budgets to spend on legal teams hopefully increases, then into other countries around the world. So we support Bitcoin Lightning payments right now for merchants through an integrated device. So that's a single device processing Lightning, debit cards, credit cards in a self-custodial infrastructure. So we can do that for in-person card present transactions and also online for e-commerce.
All right, excellent. Well, that's Lauren's question out of the way, and we'll come back and we'll get deeper into it all. Meanwhile, I think we should just do a round of introductions so people know who's on the call today and what we're going to be talking about, where you guys have come from. So feel free to go with like a 3 to 5 minute intro, your background. Some of you look older than others. You might need a little extra time. So, David, I'll hit off with you. You look like the youngest man on the call.
Well, thanks very much. Yeah, look, we started Muskets in the middle of last year, so around about July. Raised a small amount of funds to get off the ground. The challenge then was building the infrastructure, signing all of the various legal commercial deals and getting into market. So it's essentially a 9 month journey to from where we were to get to market, a lot more ahead. My background stems from I started out my career at BT, telecommunications. So I was on the grad scheme there, around about 2007, 2008. Focusing on financial infrastructure. Actually, I was very junior, first role out of university. But one of the things that fascinated me was the trading infrastructure. So I was working on the connectivity between the banks, the exchanges, the low latency algorithmic trading capability in the background. So I was sort of very taken by that industry. It was very interesting to me at the time. But then, of course, the financial crash happened, and the plans that I had for my future sort of vanishing in front of me. But I always wanted to get into consultancy, to have a very broad base, loads of various skill sets. So I spent some time at Ernst & Young, PwC, and then spent the time before Musket at Sky. So launching or supporting a lot of different business launches, product launches from within the strategy team at Sky. But it's sort of I'm probably doing myself a disservice, but it was glorified project management, really. It's sort of ushering products that have an enormous team of development behind it, product managers, technical teams, but pushing those into market. So, but Bitcoin really sort of took me in 2014. I heard about it, did a bit of research on it. I think it was the Winklevoss twins sort of buying a ton of Bitcoin post Facebook settlement that piqued my interest. And maybe we can come back to sort of the story from there. But essentially, I found about it there whilst I was doing some work for Boris Johnson when he was the mayor of London, and sort of the side project that I was given was. Is it feasible to use Bitcoin as a payment method within government? So I had a look into that as a side project. And the deeper I fell down the rabbit hole, I think I'm still falling. I'm not quite at the bottom yet. I'm still there. So that's sort of a potted history. I'm happy to come back to that, but I don't want to hog the whole call. Let's jump on to Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. Over to you, Ben. You got the hot potato.
Sure thing. So, yeah, I think a lot of people in this space do know me, but for those who are listening to this and don't, yeah, my name is Ben. I'm originally from New Zealand, but I've traveled all over the world, lived in many different countries, seen a lot of the world, and that's kind of shaped my view on how the world works, how the world interacts with each other. And I realized very early in my life, so many, many years ago, as you can tell by the gray beard, it's not recent. Um, I fell into discovering the political ideas around anarchism, and the idea of how to have order without centralized governments. So have ordered systems without having somebody to say this is how it must be. So I studied a few different things. I could never really settle on what I wanted to do, so I studied neuroscience for a bit. Never quite got my doctorate, but came close. Studied linguistics formally for a while, and kind of then fell into computer science, and spent most of my career as a software developer. Obviously, I discovered Bitcoin at some point. That was actually around 2010, so very early in Bitcoin's life. Um, and spent probably the first sort of 5, 6 years just kind of trying to understand it, because back then there weren't Bitcoin podcasts, there weren't Bitcoin books. It was just this new thing. What does this thing mean? How can we use it? How is it interesting? And I would say I also therefore, fell down the rabbit hole, but I did it much more slowly because there wasn't as much to consume. As I got more and more interested, more and more convicted in Bitcoin, I said, I have to do something with this. I have to actually work in this space. I can't just, stay on the sidelines. At the time, I was working for a giant multinational company, one of those 40,000 employee kind of companies, headquarters in Japan, all that kind of thing. And I said, I'll try and get the company to do something with Bitcoin. Of course, 2 years later of desperately trying to get them to do anything with Bitcoin, of course not. That was too early. So I left there and started to go work for a Bitcoin mining company. That was probably one of the worst decisions and the best decisions I've ever made at the same time. It was amazing to work in the Bitcoin space. It was absolutely terrible to work for a Bitcoin company who doesn't care about Bitcoin. All they cared about was energy goes in, money comes out, and to get that Bitcoin stuff out the way as quickly as possible and turn it into cold hard cash or whatever that was they wanted. So they didn't understand Bitcoin, and that was not so fun from that regard. But it got me into the Bitcoin space a bit more officially. I got to go to a lot of conferences, got to start meeting a lot more people who I'd seen them online, but I hadn't really met them before. And from there, I ended up working for a few different companies. I worked at Lightning Labs for around 6 months. I worked at Swan Bitcoin for a little bit over a year, so about 1 year, 3 months. Um, and from there, at the same time, also built up my own Bitcoin consultancy called Bitcoiner Consulting. Um, it was around, I guess, a couple of years ago now. There was a conference in Edinburgh, and I ran into David there, and he told me his ideas for this payments company. I was like, this is exactly what I want to be working with. This is what I want to be doing. This is what I want to help with, because I'm interested in Bitcoin for the same reasons that I became an anarchist. I'm interested in decentralized systems. I'm interested in how can we remove centralized systems from from the money and everything else. And with Bitcoin, if you work for a company where you're on-ramping people, okay, great, it's an on-ramp, but you're not involved in making or letting people use Bitcoin. With Musket, I can really be involved in that. So it was too early to, join Musket straight away at the time, but David got back in touch with me a little bit later and said, hey, you still interested? I said, yes, definitely. Spent a couple of months just, doing some like some short-term consulting type thing, and then came on full-time. And yeah, so now officially I'm VP of product and engineering. So not only looking after the engineering side, but also a lot of the product design, product concept, that sort of thing. So I'm bringing with my background in system architecture, as well as my kind of somewhat deeper knowledge of Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ethos, making sure everything fits from that regard.
Awesome, mate. Great. Nice to know that you're part of the team as well. Gives me a lot of confidence when great Bitcoiners like yourself join a project and you see, the long future in it. So Okay, last to introduce themselves, Adrian. Last but not least, how are you doing?
I'm really well. So my career, I suppose, the other side of Ben's world. I'm the establishment. I started my career in the very early days of smart card technology, which we now call chip cards, and working for the French company Bull Huit, which is supposedly one of the inventors of the technology, trying to find applications for it. And doing that work made me realize that the payments world is a very complex mixture of technology, regulation, human behavior, trust issues, lots of regulatory issues. And so I became, I suppose, entirely focused on innovation in payment systems. And for most of my career, that's been the card industry, where I've held senior management consultant positions in leading firms in the world. But I've also been an executive for mainstream banks in that space. And for part of my career, I was the first independent managing director of Faster Payments UK for the Bank of England. So that's the instant clearing and settlement service in the UK. So what I've loved in my career is helping people innovate. I've loved helping them find ways of doing new things within the context of the established ways of doing things, often to be disruptive, because I love that sense that you can change things from within. It's very difficult to do because it's not that there's anyone out there against what you're trying to change or against what we're trying to do. It's just inertia and fear. And it's just easier to keep doing the same thing that you did, for the last 20 years of your career. Why change? Why take a risk? I love creating circumstances in which things change. So I met up with David and we talked about what he was trying to do. I will be the first to admit that although I've been to many conferences where Bitcoin was mentioned, I don't fully understand it in the way that David and Ben clearly do. The more I learn, the more fascinated I become. And the more I learn, the more certain I am that it will become a core part of payments, almost irrespective of what is done in terms of regulation or government action. There is an inevitability about it that I think is fascinating. So when I met David and we started talking about the challenges of playing in this fiat currency card transactions space, which I know very well, I thought that I could add, with my colleague Erla Christiansdottir, we could add some value in terms of helping smooth that path to getting the proposition into the marketplace. But also, and David kindly asked me to take on the role of chairman of the business, because the business needs to be able to stand up and be part of the established way of doing things. And it needs to show that it can be governed in a way that is deeply reassuring to everyone involved. So part of my job is to be that side of the equation and help do that. But I'm just loving the chance to be part of this journey and to help Bitcoin become an everyday reality for people, instead of just an investment vehicle or something they vaguely understand, but just an everyday part of their lives. And that will be a fantastic thing to help happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And forgive me asking, but how long was your career and how old are you at the moment? Because it's reassuring again to see people like you are being drawn into the Bitcoin space. It's not just young dudes in hoodies.
I started mid-80s.
Right.
And I've led national change programs all over the world, programs for converting from magstripe to EMV. So I was doing those 15, 20 years ago. So I'm 61, and I haven't stopped trying to disrupt the world from within. And I have seen major organizations like Visa and MasterCard try and change their world. The introduction of their Visa Cash and Mondex products, for example, they found it difficult to change things. So the real beauty of what David is creating. And I have to say, part of the reason I'm involved is I think very highly of David. I think he's one of these people who combines vision with execution. I've met millions of visionaries, loads of them out there, and they'll tell you that they're going to change the world. Most of them don't do anything. David has this remarkable capacity to be. I'm not going to spare your blushes on this, David, because I know
I'm embarrassed now.
This remarkable ability both to be visionary but also to execute, get things done, make it real. And I think that's an extraordinary capability. And so for me, this feels like an opportunity to bring my years of experience doing both management consultancy and proper jobs, real jobs, and having started my own businesses and done my entrepreneurial bit, but to really support this amazing opportunity to be part of the start of Bitcoin as an everyday currency.
Amazing. Yeah, David, to put a little bit of context on all of that, you and I first chatted, I want to say 18 months, 2 years ago. I can't remember. You and I were put in touch by Greg Foss. And at the time, you were working on a different business. So you've certainly got some sticking power. Like here you are, like you've pivoted to a new thing. But do you want to talk people through like your original idea, how that came to be, the seeds that were planted, what happened, why you decided to do something different, and all of the challenges that you were facing throughout the last, was it 2 years ago? Time flies.
It was just after Edinburgh, after the Bitcoin Collective Conference. Yeah.
Right.
Let's cover that. It'd be good to sort of dive a bit deeper into, I guess, the why and why we're here doing this as well. But Greg was super helpful and in the early days and introduced us. The business, the roadmap that we had and the vision we had is almost the same. We just didn't end up doing the first piece of it. It was the original name of the business was Weave Money. The idea being what we wanted to do was actually onboard businesses and get them to allocate corporate treasury. So buying Bitcoin and advising them, here's a multi-sig, you can buy Bitcoin for your treasury and this is why you should do that. It just proved very difficult to get off the ground, and it was very hard to, the deeper we got into it, and it will make sense why we started there when I go to wind the clock back and give you the prequel. The objective was how can we increase adoption and the prevalence of Bitcoin in the business world. So that was the starting point. The second one was then to support a more frictionless on-ramp for individuals, to make it more seamless to buy and sell Bitcoin and to hold it in a self-custodial wallet. And then third was exactly where we are now, was the Musket payments component. I saw that very much as a journey to getting there, because I thought, well, okay, what's the easiest thing to get off the ground with the lowest cost base, and there's something that can perhaps we can bootstrap maybe just on 50K or something like that and get it off the ground, and then there's a nice pathway and we can grow. Doing what we're doing now from the beginning, I thought it's just going to be too much engineering, too complex, too hard to get off from a standing start. But turns out that's the path that we were forced to take anyway. So here we are. But I think when we were first introduced, that's what we were pursuing. It was looking at industry parties, seeing if we could potentially white label them, and then just go out professionally orange pilling. Going talking to individuals, businesses about why they should adopt Bitcoin. The more that we sort of modeled it, it was very difficult to drive revenue. You're either relying upon exchange fees and making quite a big spread on that. You're either relying on a subscription fee, but again, there's lots of free products out there that people can use that sort of do the job. So it was very hard to turn making Bitcoin adoption or sort of increasing Bitcoin adoption into an actual profitable business. So it just took longer to get off the ground than we thought. And actually it was helpful because along that journey, that led me to Ben, to Rich, my CTO, and a couple of the other people in the team. And actually, as we continued that path and that journey, we sort of we started attracting more of the types of people that we needed to make this a success. And rather it just being me and a couple of other people talking about the virtues of Bitcoin and why it's important for the world and for the UK. Actually, it became something bigger. It was not to sound too sort of cliched here, but it became more of an idea and an ideology, which is why I think people like Adrian who've joined the business as well have also now been attracted to it, because from it being something that could potentially help people, actually we think we can change the face of the UK in terms of Bitcoin adoption. And if it works in the UK, then there's an argument to say this has got viable options in every other country in the world to expand. So yeah, long story short, we met and we cut the first phase of the business and decided to just go the whole hog and build what we wanted to build anyway. No one was doing us any favors to help us get the funding in place. So we said, well, let's just try and live and breathe our vision and mission and make it up as we go along from there. And we landed the funds to do that end of summer last year and have been heavily building and laying the foundation since then.
Can you shield the investors? Is that something, or is that an NDA? It's completely up to you.
I believe it's public. I'm not sure. Yeah, so there's a couple of angels, so angels that you wouldn't know. So UK people who are interested, and again have heard of Bitcoin, but have sort of bought into the vision. And I think the big difference maker here was attaching a traditional fiat debit credit card processing business to this, because you can then meet people where they are. We can go and have those conversations with merchants, and we can say, we can replace your entire stack. There's no need for another device. There's no need for any other complexity. We abstract away all of that and make it as easy as possible for any cashier, whether they know what Bitcoin is or not, to accept Bitcoin. So adding that into the proposition made it a lot more attractive to investors who may not have otherwise invested. So your sort of everyday angels, so the business model made more sense. It stepped away from ideological reasoning to more, okay, this is a very logical pathway to revenue and profit. So Brad Mills was an early investor who is a Canadian with a fantastic beard, one which it might be better than yours, Ben. I think yours is well crafted, but I think Ben's is Brad's is more voluminous. Who else? So Axiom Capital or Axiom Fund. So that's Alan Farrington's fund. And there's a sort of handful of other angels from the UK that have joined the round. So you'd probably know a couple of them. But
amazing, great to see the scene in the UK is is being well supported, and that's and well done, Brad. He's doing some great work on the angel side of things. So, and Alan as well with Axiom. Possibly, you must have been like one of the first 5 investments, if they've even made 5. So
yeah, I think it was perfect timing, because they was just starting up as we were starting to pitch in sort of July last year. Again, a really big fan of Alan's work, his writing, the way that he approaches sort of everything that he does with bare logic. He's clearly had an excellent education over the years, but
and sarcasm. He wouldn't mind us saying that. Like
the cut of his jib, yeah. He said that his background was very much payments focused as well. So his time in a previous life, he understood this world. So I think, and that really helps when you're pitching to investors about something that maybe is somewhat ideological. If you can actually then meet them in the middle and say, but this is how it fits into the real world, and this is how adoption can really sort of take a leap forward here. It makes a lot more sense, and both of those things Alan had a background in, Bitcoin and traditional card payments, so it was a nice fit.
All right, Ben, I'm going to jump to you as VP of product, and engineering, I think.
Product and engineering, yep.
Well, let's hear about it. Let's hear about how you've engineered this product. I mean, I was showcased it by David at Bitcoin Atlantis, and just to get the listeners up to speed, handheld point of sale device, like any other handheld point of sale device. There it is on the screen. that you've
Yep.
ever seen. So, Trojan Horse, it's a beauty. So yeah, talk us through it, mate. What was the thinking behind it, the design, the ethos, and the hard work, sweat, and tears that have gone into getting this piece of hardware out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the hardware itself is an off-the-shelf payment terminal, and that's actually a good thing. We haven't had to, design hardware from scratch and, all that sort of stuff. It's that's a nightmare to do. So we're using a very standard, it's called a PAX A920, very standard terminal that, lots of shops have. People are familiar with this hardware. It's good, it's reliable, very easy to source, replacements if something breaks. Somebody drops it on a concrete floor, smashes it into 1,000 pieces, they'll get a new one very, very quickly. So what we're really concentrating therefore on is the software side of things and saying, what is it that we're actually trying to achieve here? So, we've got those two worlds that we're trying to bring together, the fiat world and the Bitcoin world. And for the fiat world, you've got your traditional card payment software, that kind of thing on these terminals, and the cashier types in a number, hits hits a button, and now you can tap your card or swipe your card or insert your card or whatever you like, and it prints it, makes the payment, it prints out a receipt. What we really wanted to do was make it equally as easy to use Bitcoin on the exact same device. So the front screen essentially has two options, pay with Bitcoin or pay with card. And if you select to pay with Bitcoin, it opens up another screen where it simply asks for the amount. You enter the amount, you hit OK, and it generates a QR code. That's all very easy, but what's happening on the back end is actually, I would say, the really interesting part, and also where we get into a lot of the Bitcoin ethos. Because if you look at something, some of the, let's say, other competitor Bitcoin payment solutions out there, not only do they have a separate device, but they are also custodial systems. So they're running maybe one large Lightning node, and all of the payments are going in there, and then they'll just kind of pay out to the people as necessary. We are taking a very different approach. We are a self-custodial solution. That means that every merchant who wants to receive and hold Bitcoin gets their own node. That we are essentially managing for them, but they have their own keys. So we have the ability to, open up a new channel to them, make sure all of the liquidity is balanced, make sure everything is, all of the complexity of Lightning that your typical shop isn't going to want to deal with. That's our responsibility, but they get to hold their own keys. So if we disappear tomorrow, then they can use those keys to force close a channel, get their Bitcoin out, and they haven't lost anything. That also puts us in the enviable position of not being custodians. So there's a lot of financial regulations and difficulties around being a custodian. We aren't, so we don't have to worry about those kinds of things. Of course, we still need to be careful about various different regulations and so on. We need to look into those and make sure we're fully above board. But overall, it's this self-custodial approach is very unique. Other than that, because of the hardware, we're actually able to do some relatively clever things as well. Because this device is just an NFC reader on the front, we're going to support Bolt cards very, very soon. So I've actually written the code for supporting a Bolt card already. It's not integrated into the terminal yet, but it will be. I personally don't actually do a lot of development these days, but occasionally it's fun to get my hands dirty and write a little bit of code and make something happen. So Bolt card support will be coming. And of course, we can then expand beyond that to add any other kinds of features which are required. So if you look at the fiat side of things, people will have other requests like, okay, do you want to have merchant receipts as well as customer receipts? Do you want to have one or the other or both, or maybe neither? Do you want to be able to issue refunds? What does that look like? All of these kinds of features will be able to build into the Bitcoin side of things as well. So there should be the same kind of experience between fiat and Bitcoin 100% across the board for whatever makes sense.
Okay, mate. Look, all right, lots to go on. Is it Lightning only or on-chain enabled as well?
So it's Lightning only at the moment. We are going to build on-chain capabilities, but the idea is very much Lightning first because typical payment scenarios are Lightning. We do have, some very, let's say, high value payment potential customers. And when you're talking about very high value, let's say, imagine a car sales yard or something. They're probably not going to want to sell a car over a lightning payment. So for that, absolutely, we will have on-chain payments. It's not there yet, and we do have to think about some of the additional complexity, like how do we handle a reorg? So the payment gets confirmed once into the chain, but then all of a sudden there's a reorg, and that transaction is no longer there. We need to think about how we handle those things from a UI UX perspective, because we don't just want to be able to support Bitcoin. We want to be able to support Bitcoin in a way that a non-Bitcoiner can understand and use.
Yeah. Let's walk before we run, right? Start with Lightning, start with the lower payments, start getting the merchants on board, which is happening slowly. Great pleb work being done, especially in the UK. Not just with, there's a couple of guys. Shout out to Hashley and all of the work he's been doing, Hashley Giles, and the Bridge to Bitcoin guys. The incredible work. The team over there, Simon, James, and Chris. Grassroots, getting out there, meeting the shop owners where they're at, and now they can walk in with this point of sale machine, which, if I'm right, and you're saying it obsoletes the existing payment machine in the shop.
Yes.
Can they save money by switching contract over to your handheld device to whatever they're using currently at the moment?
Yes, and I think it's worth bringing Adrian in at the end of my little bit here, just for background on the UK market. But so again, utter those thanks to Bridge to Bitcoin, who are doing great work. We're going to be exhibiting in October at the same event that they were at last year, and I think they're at the same one as well, so the hospitality retail event in the Excel Centre.
I love that. They just plebs descend on the hospitality industry and go around the booths as volunteers. Like, why are you not accepting Bitcoin? It's just the best.
Hopefully, if we get chased out of there, then I think that's a successful event. And yeah, Hashley Giles, we're so the original plan here is that we still want to execute is Hashley's got a 25-30 year career in field sales, and has, to his sort of name, around at least 50 field sales employees. So as we scale and as those funds start to come through, and we have a bigger war chest, we will be contracting with Hashley to lead that team, and get boots on the ground, knocking on every single business in the UK, and growing that Bitcoin adoption. But to your point, yes, we can replace everything. So I think there's a nuanced side to this. So where we are able to deliver significant value right now is in e-commerce. So anyone in the UK that takes payments and uses Stripe, we typically can be around about 30% cheaper than Stripe.
Wow.
So we may not be as feature rich as Stripe, but we do the basics very well. Where our card merchant acquiring bank in the background has been very accommodating, understanding of our vision, and they've bought into and believe everything that we have told them and said about the growth journey of Bitcoin, and us. So they were very happy to support us in a way that means that we can compete aggressively. So if you're doing business in the UK and you want to drop 30% off your Stripe fees, then pick up the phone and give us a call, or drop an email over at hello@musket, or tweet us aggressively. But on the card acquiring market, the card present solution, yes, we can again deliver savings. Typically, where we deliver those is merchants who accept Square, SumUp, iZettle. They tend to offer blended rates of around about, it ranges from between 1.2% to 1.8%. But our rack rate sort of out of the gate is going to be 0.5% plus 5 pence. So anyone with a £50 transaction, so the overall cost base for a merchant, is around about 0.6%, using us on a domestic debit card basis versus using a Square, SumUp, iZettle. So we can certainly add value there. It's more nuanced for the low cost operators. And I think that's probably a good point for Adrian to jump in and sort of give a bit more of a background on sort of card payments. Because I think so if you've got any US or foreign listeners, they would probably be surprised that that domestic debit and credit rates are so low in the UK.
Okay. Yeah, Adrian.
Yeah, it's the UK market for card acceptance has been very aggressively competed for over the last 15 years, really since the American market model came in, with a lot of people reselling, acquiring services, very aggressive pricing, mostly around debit, which is the dominant payment method in the UK. So taking money directly from your own bank account via a debit card payment as opposed to a credit or a charge card. And as a result, most merchants are fixated quite rightly on how much is debit and how much does it cost to rent the terminal. And in both those regards, we're competitive. I think what you tend to find is that pricing for merchant services in the UK is so opaque. Most merchants will confidently tell you that they're paying, 0.5%. And when you go through the statement they're getting from their acquirer, typically they're paying 1.5% because there's lots of hidden add-ons and all sorts of other things going on. So we're trying to be very straightforward, very open and honest about the pricing, being very clear with what we're charging, and being competitive. And we're partnered with an organization that can allow us to be competitive, very supportive. And I think it puts us in a good place, because what we need to do is to support merchants who want to accept Bitcoin, but not ask them to make a financial sacrifice for their business, or to compromise on customer service, or on responsiveness, or on how quickly they get paid. All of those areas we're competitive. So for me, and you used the expression Trojan Horse earlier on, it is the perfect expression. If we want Bitcoin to fly as a everyday currency in people's everyday lives, we need to introduce it through a mechanism that doesn't cause massive disruption and put them off. And what Ben has built under David's vision is just a very beautiful way of doing it. And we went to the launch event in Brighton, and I, as an old hand in the payments industry, I've sat and watched innovation at point of sale go horribly wrong as people wait 4 hours for a transaction, or it just keeps failing. And it was that night in Brighton, it was just seamless, very beautiful to watch people paying by card, then paying by Bitcoin. The staff get it. It's the same device. They're not confused. Customers get it. And I think that's what makes this, a very key innovation in the journey to turning Bitcoin into this everyday payment mechanism.
Yeah, you said a beautiful way to do it. Some might say a sly, roundabout way to do it. That's our old friend Hayek might have.
I spent a lot of time doing strategy work for clients, and there's a very good strategist, ex-military guy in the States, who had 10 rules for a good strategy. And one of his rules, a chap called Cohen, one of his rules was never headbutt your way to victory. And I think if you want to be purist about things and say, we will only ever do anything, the Bitcoin way in glorious isolation, that's headbutting your way to victory. I like plans where you sneak round the back and win. And that's what we're doing. And I think merchants, as they discover the value of Bitcoin acceptance, the fact that they are basically getting real value practically instantly, that's powerful stuff, let alone the fact that there are all sorts of other advantages. But we're not asking them to blow up their world and stop accepting card payments today. And so for me, it's just an elegant way of introducing the capability into the real world of point of sale, which is, when you think about point of sale, it isn't the shop owner who's taking payment. It's the 16-year-old kid working on a Saturday. They don't understand any of it. They don't want to, and they shouldn't need to. So what we've done, I think, is just a very elegant way of making it normal and everyday.
And when I was talking to Ben just a little bit earlier, he said we should come back to you and talk about the regulation side of things, and being up to speed with what the current regulation, what's the current landscape, because it's changing all of the time. And we have the crypto think tanks in different countries around the world. If only Freddie New were here to tell us about his view on the crypto think tanks.
Well, Freddie is the expert in terms of crypto regulation. I can say from my perspective, we have to observe any number of rules and regulations to play in this space. There are those that are set by the UK government and monitored by like the FCA and the payment services regulator. There are those that are the rules of the card schemes. Visa and MasterCard have their own set of rules around card acceptance, what you can and cannot do. And of course, there are rules around data protection. All of these need to be observed, and they do create complexity. Understanding them and finding your way through them is not easy. I admire David for having taken not just legal advice, but top quality legal advice on this journey, because I've seen so many startups jump in, talk to a provincial solicitor and ask if it's okay and get there. Yeah, it seems okay. David has taken some very high quality legal input, and I'm very confident that we're in a good place from that point of view. And the rules, the general rule about regulators is they don't stop regulating. And it is in their nature to keep trying to regulate. So it's not gonna get easier as we go forward. And I would say that the more meaningful Bitcoin becomes, the more it will be regulated. And I don't think we should fear that. We should accept it as a consequence of success. You don't bother regulating something that isn't being used. You just ignore it. So the more I see regulators getting worried about crypto, the more I think, that's actually a sign that they know it's real and it's coming and it's going to be big. Because they really don't bother doing the work unless they think it's going to become something of consequence. So for me, it feels like we're in a good place as Muscat. We can cope with regulatory change, really solid legal foundation to our understanding of how we go through this. And that's deeply reassuring for everyone who wants to work with us, because nobody wants to be exposed to those sorts of risks.
Probably a bridging question. Sorry, David, go ahead.
Sorry, maybe might have a delay. You named up Freddie there. Freddie gave a nice talk at our launch night. So we had the one we had in Brighton. Dominic Frisby came and we had a fireside chat with Dominic and Freddie for I thought it'd be 20 minutes, but I think it was over an hour that we spoke for about sort of all kinds of things. But Freddie's recently joined Muscat as an advisor, so he's on our advisory board. I think hopefully I'm able to state that publicly. If I'm not, Freddie, I apologize, but it's out there now. So yeah, the reason for doing that and asking Freddie to be an advisor to us is to make sure that we are as close as possible to the work that the Bitcoin policy team are doing in the UK, which I think is fantastic. Susie's also on our team, so Susie Violet Ward does a lot of ghostwriting for us. So when I put pen to paper, I tend to write 30,000 words, and Susie sort of is able to synthesize that into something legible or sort of understandable for the normal person. And the reason I mentioned Freddie there is, as Adrian said, we actually approached this legal first. So I had the idea and said, look, this is what we want to do. How can we do this? And we wanted to do it in a way that was that avoided having to get our FCA license for a Bitcoin payment business at the beginning and at the outset. And the way to do that was to treat it as an unregulated asset and a method of payment that is outside of the realms of the UK government legislation. Now, regulations can change, as Adrian said. Everything is a moving feast, but the legal advice again that we we've got is has given us the basis upon which to operate. So and that also then shaped how we approached it. It meant that we couldn't ever take custody of funds. We couldn't get involved in the payment flows. That had to be a direct relationship between the customer and the merchant. If any exchange, and we are launching our exchange service very soon, but that will be again a direct relationship between the merchant and the exchange. We are not involved in the payment flows there. Yes, I think it was essential to tackle all of these problems up front, because if we hadn't, then we would either had to re-architect everything that we built, or we'd have had to spend a lot of money getting various legal and regulatory approvals in place before we launched. And we probably will do all of those things anyway. But it's a question of how do you use that powder that you've got. You know, you've had some investment. Do you go and spend 200 grand on legal and regulatory fees to just be above board, or do you build something else that you know can do exactly what you need it to, and avoid those sort of burdensome fees? And you know, that's the route we took.
Are you able to shield the lawyers in case anybody listening?
CMS. So I'm not sure what the full name is, Cameron McKenna. But again, that was another. There's been all kinds of sort of fundamental turning points along this journey. It was around about the time we met. So again, I sort of laid out the vision to Cameron to CMS, and they invited us to be on their startup program, which gives us discounted rates and access to the best partners in their firm. And they have a dedicated crypto asset division. So, you know, we had to do a lot of work with them to make sure that their understanding of the Lightning Network was as it needed to be. And some of it was a world first for them. You know, they had a very good team, but the nuances of where how the Lightning Network works, we needed them to really understand it so that they could really make sure that we're on solid legal footing. So that was the sort of the journey throughout Q3 last year.
Orange pilling law firms, I love it, on the Lightning Network.
Ended up costing us a fortune, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Ben, this was going to be my next question anyway, but you've led me straight into it, David. I was going to ask about the situation whereby a merchant is using the point of sale machine. They've been using it for 6 months. They've taken a couple of £1,000 worth of payments over that time. Bitcoin pumps, and now all of a sudden they're looking at like 5,000, 6,000, and they're getting a little bit nervous, or they need some cash to pay suppliers, or they need some cash to clear some, tax bills or whatever, How? Like, what's the next step for them? Obviously, you're going to build in, as David just alluded to, some kind of exchange service. But yeah, what's the vision? Can they do that right now, or what's the process?
So right now, as in very, very soon, yes. So today, no. A couple of weeks from now, yes. So the process is actually, I'll start off on kind of the two extremes. One, they want to only accept and hold Bitcoin. So they, of course, they also take card payments, and that they keep in pounds. But every Bitcoin payment they receive, they want to keep. They've got a Lightning channel, and for the non-technical viewers out there, Lightning has what's called a channel capacity. It has a certain size. Once you've received, you have to then send that out again for that capacity to be available. So we have a system set up using LND's auto loop function, which essentially says once enough of the channel balance is on the wrong side, so I can send a lot but I can't receive, it will loop out to an on-chain address. At the moment, that's just within their node, but of course we can also enable it to set up to go to a hardware wallet or anything else, so keep things very secure for them. That's people who want to then, let's say at some point down the line, they then say, okay, I need some of that in fiat. Then of course they'll have a relationship with the exchange, and they can simply take that out of their cold storage and, like anybody else, exchange it for pounds. Then you've got the other extreme scenario where they only want to accept pounds. So we've got a merchant and they're not convinced by Bitcoin yet. They say, okay, sure, I think accepting it is nice, but I certainly don't want to hold Bitcoin. That's not interesting to me. We will have the ability to not have a node, so have a merchant without a node at all. And there will be payments essentially generated going straight to the exchange. So we've got a arrangement with the exchange that we're working with, whereby our software will send them a message. They will generate a Lightning invoice on our behalf, and that will be displayed on our terminal so that can then be paid by the customer. It goes straight to the exchange and will be converted into pounds. And then at the end of the day or whatever, they'll be able to do the transfer into the merchant's bank account. So that way, you've got the merchants who only accept pounds, and they never have to worry about anything to do with their node, never have to even think about Bitcoin. It's just another way that they can accept pounds. Then there's the in-between, and that's kind of the interesting one. They say, okay, we want to accept Bitcoin, but we need some of that in pounds from time to time. What we're going to be doing, we have an admin interface already for the system. So beyond just what you see on the terminal device, there is this administrator interface, which they can use. And on that interface, there will be the ability to perform an exchange directly using our exchange manually whenever they like. And we've also got plans for a automated split. So it's still kind of TBD how much people are going to want to use this function, but the idea could be 50% of the Bitcoin I receive becomes pounds and 50% goes into my cold storage. So that will all be an option at some point in the future. That last one, though, kind of depending on need. Maybe that's required, maybe nobody cares.
All right. Okay. A few more questions. So you'll be partnering with another exchange?
Yeah, so with Solideye, so they're Cambridge-based outfits. I don't know whether you know those guys, but Jamie, the CEO, is a great guy. I believe he went to Cambridge University and then may have been funded as a spin out. I might be speaking out of turn there, but
what's the name? Sorry,
Solideye, Solidi. I believe, yeah, they're sort of somewhat low key, but I believe they're possibly one of the UK's oldest exchanges. They've been around for quite a while, if not the oldest. But fully FCA regulated. They do support other assets, but they're an exchange. So, that's where they need the revenue. But we being Bitcoin only, had great discussion with Jamie about that, the CEO, and he's very accommodating and understanding. He said, look, Bitcoin is absolutely the right thing, but we as an exchange are sort of open to others. But so having that level of discussion and understanding and ability to customize how they execute it, specifically for us, was a major sort of green flag for us. There were others that we were talking to. There was various friction points. For us, the first thing is to make sure that we are fully outside of fund flows and any exchange, because that brings you into the focus of FCA regulations. The second thing then was how do we create the best, most seamless customer experience, and that was being able to work with them and nest some of that in our UI and have a really almost sort of 3-click process to get the funds out of Bitcoin and into pounds was essential. So that's who we partnered with.
All right. Okay. Solideye, yeah, I'd not heard of them, so I'll look into it. Looks sounds interesting. I thought pretty much the only game in town in the UK was Coin Corner, but there are other options then.
Yeah, it's I mean, yeah, you can still use Kraken and others, but I did have a good chat with Danny at Coin Corner about it, and there was just a couple of things that we weren't able to do through Coin Corner that we were able to do through Solideye. And for the majority of people, I think their exchange of choice has always been, and most likely will always be, Coin Corner. But Solideye for us did exactly what we needed to, and I think they are sort of going through their own growth journey as well. And I think they're one to watch, I'd say, in terms of an exchange in the UK.
Cool. So Ben, well, maybe the last technical question. You said everybody gets their own node. People might have in the back of their minds, do you go in with another like little Raspberry Blitz? You set that up underneath the desk, and they're doing the initial Bitcoin download. Like, how's it working?
So it's a node in the cloud. Right now we're using Voltage as our partner there, because they make it very, very easy to do all of that with API calls and so on. So we can just spin up a new node as needed. That may change in the future. We keep our options open. But one of the nice things is, however we decide to do it in the background, our merchants never need to even see that happening. So the first thing they do when they connect, or when they open up the node, is that they will actually see this screen, our standard admin screen, and it will say that their node is currently being provisioned. Then the node is currently synchronizing, and then at some point later, okay, the node is now available and they can use it. Since that takes some time, generally what we will be doing is that it happens at the same time as they're signing up for everything else. And of course, it's not instant that you can get a terminal shipped out to you. So by the time the terminal is at their door, their node is also absolutely already very long up and running and ready to be used.
And how do they get their keys?
Sort of the flashbang to sort of set up to activation time. If we didn't have the device, it'd probably right now be about 2 hours, on the basis that you're signing up, creating your account, but then what happens then is that message goes over to Voltage, and it provisions your node, it opens the channels, it applies the sats. And for all of that to take place, it requires 3 active confirmations. So 3 confirmations on the networks at the moment. We are looking at ways to make that quicker. But as Ben said, you as a merchant shouldn't necessarily care about that, because it will take around about 5 to 7 working days to go through all of the accounts set up with our debit credit card bank in the background, and to ship the terminal to you. But as Ben said, by the time it arrives, then off you go. It's already provisioned and set up.
And so as for how they get their keys, quite simply on our admin user interface, there is an option to show their key. We have no access to that. So even though it's in our software, it's an instance of the software which we simply don't have access to. So we can never see the keys of the customer's node. So part of the setup is, okay, you need to go here, you need to click this, you need to write these down.
And keep them safe. Don't keep them in the cash register.
Yeah. I mean, best case scenario, they will never need it, but it's there for the worst case scenario.
Absolutely. And following, of course, the ethos, right, of Bitcoin.
Exactly.
So, Adrian, I want to come back to something you were talking about, like the market for debit cards in the UK, and fiercely competitive, and this reselling. And I know that people have set up businesses. I think Santander they would employ people. Basically, anybody could resell the Santander, I think, Visa debit card or whatever, with a point of sale machine as well, and go around and do this. Just walk into merchants. This is classic pleb work stuff. Build your own business. You're undercutting the main street. Here's the point of sale. Here's 1.5% on every transaction instead of 2.5% that you're currently paying, and you'd build up a customer base. I know a guy that did this. He made a living out of doing it. Is that? Can we get that pleb army shilling musket on our behalf? So you've got Normie Land doing the same thing, rather than just relying on the plebs.
Yeah, in principle, yes, and David is already building in that direction. This market model, which because you go back far enough, 20 years ago, a merchant in this country would only be able to buy a card acquiring service and a terminal from a bank, from Barclays, from NatWest, from Lloyds. And then about 15 years ago, Elevon came into the European market from the States and brought the so-called ISO, Independent Sales Organization model, where you can resell a bank's acquiring service. And there are various ways of doing it. Some of them I think are quite tawdry, quite aggressive, unpleasant. Some of them got into a lot of trouble with regulators for basically lying to merchants about what would be charged. The good ones are very good, and we're talking to them. And they are generally speaking, they're a group of people who've got to know their local community. They've got to know these retailers, and they don't just sell payment services on behalf of banks. They sell insurance, they sell refrigeration repair services, a broad gamut of services needed by these retailers. The thing that makes them really useful and powerful is those retailers trust them, and they know that, you know, they won't sell them a bad product because they don't want to breach that relationship. So we're going to be accessing those channels. And, you know, I've built a business myself in that space using those ISO channels. A highly effective way of doing it.
I am very bullish on that.
One thing on sort of mobilizing the crowd. I think, look, that's exactly what we want to do. You know, anyone that my theory here is that everyone knows someone who owns a business, whether that's a coffee shop, a restaurant, some form of business. So, you know, if you're involved in Bitcoin in the UK, or you're interested in it, or even if you're a business owner, please reach out. You know, our referral, I would love to be able to pay referrals in Bitcoin, but we can't. The FCA and sort of regulatory environment prevents us from doing that. But what we can do is pay a sales bonus for people who sign a contract with us to effectively operate on our behalf and sell muskets to the crowd. So we have a sliding scale. Don't kick me, Adrian, but a sliding scale, so going from £150 to 10k as a referral bonus. So, you know, if you own a business that is doing 50 million in revenue, we're happy to pay you 10k for onboarding that business with us, because our target in the short term is to establish Musket as a payments business in the UK, and we need first year 150 million revenue to process. By year 5, that needs to be around about 5 billion. But you know, so it's got to be a constant growth journey. Any type of business, but you know, realistically, people doing a minimum of 100k. I'll always have a conversation, because the broader strategy or the broader objective here is not just about building a viable business. It's actually about making sure that the UK has got a fully open stance towards accepting Bitcoin, and that every merchant, you know, the biggest challenge that I came up with. So I ran a training course on a sort of a side note to my job about sort of 8 years ago, and it was you know, we would talk about the history of money, Bitcoin, why that's important. And the big question that people would always ask is, well, if Bitcoin is money and you're telling me it's money, why can't I spend it anywhere? And I think that's really at the heart of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to address that problem, and that very specific problem, because until that's addressed, it's very easy to then have other bigger, louder voices in the room saying they believe that Bitcoin, the only real utility of Bitcoin, is a store of value. And we've seen that narrative spin up over the last few weeks. It's one that I fully disagree with. I think, yes, Bitcoin is a store of value, but if Bitcoin is only a store of value, Bitcoin has failed, in my view. You know, Bitcoin is freedom money. It's an expression of freedom of speech, and it's code. So it challenges our very idea of what money is and what it means to transact. So you know, for it just to be sort of cornered by some loud institutions and voices to say it's a great store of value. Sure, it's on that adoption curve, but the job isn't done until it's a full unit of account. And you know, arriving at a global money and unit of account requires that you progress through to becoming a medium of exchange. And that's very much the vision for or the driving force behind Musket. We want Bitcoin to be a viable medium of exchange in the UK and beyond.
100% agree. And we're all kind of on that journey personally, right? I think that it's almost like with each cycle, you move across, you move closer to the medium of exchange. You start with the hodling and the DCAing and doing all the right stuff and storing your value, you know, switching your investment thesis, switching your retirements, switching out of your legacy financial nonsense, life insurance, you know, SIPs and ISAs, whatever you thought, you know, was the right thing to be doing in the past, into a store of value. But give it a couple of cycles and you'll need it to become a medium of exchange. I know many of us do, because damn, like, you know, not earning fiat, and I have money here, which I can't use. And of course, this has to be an addressable problem, because without the ability to spend it and to use it and to interact with it, I mean, what are we going to be doing? It's that,
it's not just that, I know it's somewhat of an edge risk, but I do very much think that it's an edge risk worth monitoring, and I know it's something that Freddie monitors as well. Is the encroachment of government action over money, and we're seeing that through these ideas and the discussions and discourse both in the UK and across the world around central bank digital currencies. Now, this is not a tinfoil threat. Central bank digital currency for me is the dragnet that comes down, which ends the world in the sense of freedom. The experience of 200-300 years ago, up until I'd say sort of maybe the sort of 50 years ago, is the point at which freedom really started to be eroded. There is a day coming. We already see it in China with social credit scoring. And these 15-minute city ideologies are sort of somewhat problematic in my view as well. I like the idea that people can go where they want, buy what they want, and not be told what they can and can't do. And I think the only way to push back against excuse me, these forthcoming regulations and challenges that have been sponsored by the government is to have an alternative, and self-custodial Bitcoin is that alternative. You can't stop it, and it's a great way of businesses earning money in an asset that isn't being devalued. So it makes sense for them to have a Bitcoin strategy and sell goods and services in it, at the same time as it makes sense for individuals to start using it as a method of payment, or at the very least, to familiarize themselves with how they might do that if and when the time comes for them to need it. And sort of segue to Ben there. Ben's a great example of this. He sort of lives his life on a Bitcoin standard. I think not everyone's ready for that yet, but that's the world that we're trying to lay the foundations for. I hope, in some ways, I almost hope it doesn't arrive. A CBDC world is a dark world, but we want to prepare against it. And as one of the sort of pillars of our strategy is to make sure that that infrastructure is there, ready both for individuals and businesses to use it if and when they need to.
Before we pick up with Ben, I just want to switch across to Adrian there, because you mentioned that you had been involved with some projects with the Bank of England in the past, and I'm just wondering, do you have conversations with any old chums from over there that might still be knocking around, their level of understanding of what CBDC actually truly, horribly is, or what's kind of the chat in those circles, or are you completely kind of disjointed from that now?
No, I run a consultancy that works in the payment space. So we engage with central banks and the card schemes and banks. So I'm still plugged into the establishment, I suppose. I would say that they are alive to the risks of misdesigning CBDCs. Their problem is that they can never know who will come to power and what they will do with the possibility of a CBDC. And I don't believe it's possible to design one in which they can't use it to leverage a degree of control. They are also, of course, responding to an international threat. It's quite clearly the case that China has been investing since, I think, 2004, huge amounts building the digital renminbi, and doing it very deliberately to try and add further strictures to their Belt and Road strategy, so that not only are physical goods being moved around the world, but they are then being paid for in digital renminbi. It's still a tiny fraction of dollar transactions, but it's growing. And so as I talk to my colleagues in that space, they're not trying to design something sinister, but what they are struggling to do is design something that can't be misused in the future. And that's the dilemma. And I think the irony, of course, is if they could go back in time, they would design Bitcoin. But they can't do that now because it already exists. and they have no control over it. But they would probably come up with Bitcoin. And so they're in a dilemma because there is an international challenge. There are some benefits of CBDCs. There are some real problems with the current form of money that we accept. CBDCs would address some of those, but I don't think they can design out the risks. And so that they are a bit stuck. And you can see that by the glacial pace of, the Bank of England CBDC program. I don't see it coming to anything useful anytime soon.
Fingers crossed.
Also, and I'm old enough to have been around to watch, people rightly identifying threats and risks and believing somehow that governments and those who try and develop things for governments are all powerful and will do these things. I wouldn't hold your breath. I don't imagine anything coming out for a long while. What I would pick up on is David's remark about needing Bitcoin in play if those things failed. There are lots of countries who have on their national risk register a systemic risk of the major card schemes failing, because there are countries where the only way of transacting is through Visa and MasterCard. There isn't enough cash in circulation for business to go on for more than half a day because they've become wholly dependent reasonably on Visa and MasterCard. And some of those countries' fallback strategy could well become Bitcoin acceptance. And so that will be fascinating when we see countries, especially smaller countries, where the costs of building your own CBDC are prohibitive. We could well see them saying, actually, our fallback is Bitcoin. And we can use a technology like Musket to facilitate that so that we don't have to try and print millions of notes overnight and get them into circulation, because there is a real risk in some countries of that problem.
And as usual, Bitcoin fixes this. Ben, going to come to you because you live under a different central bank. You live under the ECB, as do I at the moment.
So officially, yes. But no, I've been myself living on a Bitcoin standard since around 2017.
Wow.
That doesn't mean I only spend Bitcoin, because that's unfortunately still essentially impossible. But what I really mean by that is that I only hold Bitcoin as for any kind of long-term thing. I don't ever hold any other currency. And Bitcoin is my preferred first currency. I would also say slowly over time, it has become the unit of account in my head as well. So we're talking about the switch from store of value to medium of exchange. I'd say I've gone the next step, medium of exchange to unit of account. I live in Germany, but I'm actually quite close to both the Czech border and the Polish border. So there are actually three currencies, three traditional fiat currencies around me at any given time. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm originally from New Zealand, but I lived in Australia for a while, and I still have an Australian credit card that I will use from time to time. And of course, it's denominated in Australian dollars. So in a way, there are actually four fiat currencies around me at any given time. They're fluctuating all against each other. Yeah, there is nothing stable. So it's very easy for me to then just view Bitcoin as the stable currency, and all of these other things are just fluctuating around it. I don't have this luxury of, okay, everything is euro for me. No, because it isn't. I can drive half an hour from where I live and everything's in Czech crowns. Drive another half an hour from there and everything's in the Polish zloty.
How are you, like, to give the listeners a day-to-day example of how you're living on a Bitcoin standard? A lot of people want to get there, and I think you're actually going to give a talk about this in Bulgaria.
Yes, so actually, I'm giving a talk about this in Bulgaria, but actually also in Arnhem at Adopting Bitcoin Arnhem in about 1 month from now, I think it is. Overall, the way that I live on a Bitcoin standard is that I don't hold any fiat currency. I prefer to spend Bitcoin directly where available. I'm very thankful to btcmap.org for existing. So shout out to Nathan Day there. it's an amazing project, and we love him. So I'll use BTC Map to find places where I can go and spend Bitcoin directly. And wherever I can't, I make use of either that Australian credit card, which I mentioned, because I can then pay that off using a service called Wallet of Satoshi, which lets me pay an Australian credit card off any Australian credit card or other bill using Bitcoin. Or I'll use something like Bitrefill. So if I wanted to go shopping at the Rewe supermarket chain here in Germany, I can just get a Rewe coupon using Bitcoin. So there's always options for that sort of thing, and that's essentially how I do it. It also makes it easier. My family is essentially orange pilled along with me to an extent. My daughter probably more so than the others, but if my son, for example, wanted something recently, and I said, I'm not really willing to buy that for you, and he's like, well, okay, I'll send you the Bitcoin. Opens up a wallet on his little phone and sends it across to me, and okay, fine, you can buy that thing. You wanted it, you paid for it.
Love it, mate. Love it. All right, okay, we'll start wrapping it up. One thing that did cross my mind was the new service for invoicing out there, David. Zaprite. I don't know if you guys have had a chat with them, because when you're onboarding merchants, like one of the barriers to entry is like, well, how am I going to invoice for this? Or they might want to take that next step and start invoicing suppliers, and if they're willing to spend Bitcoin as well. Have you chatted with those guys, or can I put you in touch in any way?
We haven't. More than happy to speak to them. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'll make that introduction because it's built invoicing, accounting, balance sheet system built for Bitcoiners by Bitcoiners. John McGill, Parker Lewis, Will Cole, those guys are behind it. So I think that's definitely you want to have that in your stable when you're trying to orange pill merchants, and just go through all of those checkpoints, especially the bigger ones, right? Fun question for Ben. Have you programmed any Easter eggs into the Musket handheld device there?
So no, I am actually a big fan of Easter eggs on software where it doesn't matter. But no, I would never put an Easter egg on a terminal where payments are being made. That's
I was
sadly
hoping for a meme to pop up there every payment. The Liotta meme laughing with the laser eyes. Not good. Adrian, would that fly?
It would be fun, but no, there's far too much responsibility that comes with financial transactions to do that sort of thing.
We'll have a think though, Dan. I'm sure there's something we could sneak in there. I saw recently, I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was River, who it executed. I don't know whether it was just a joke, but they said they would execute if you try and sell Bitcoin through their platform, they would surface a Michael Saylor picture looking disapprovingly at you, saying, "Are you sure you want to sell this?" So niche memeage is probably not where we want to be on this, but we appreciate it much the same, but we'll give it some thought. I'm sure there's something we can.
It would be great, wouldn't it, if you just made the payment quickly on the handheld terminal, and as the lightning is taken, you just get there is no second best. Just a little. I
mean, technically, we can do that. I mean, the suggestion from our launch merchant was, he actually said, "What's the noise? Have you given any thought to sort of the noise about when someone makes a payment in Bitcoin?"
Yeah.
He said, are you going to sort of with the name, are you going to make it sound like an exploding gunshot? I said, well, that's probably not the right thing to do. He said, well, what about when someone pays with a card? Why don't you use sort of that? I can't remember where it comes from, but the noise. Wow, wow, wow. That's very good. Nice. But probably not, given that 90% of our revenue comes from card payments. We probably should be doing that.
Not a good idea. I was going to ask one more question around that. You'll probably... Yeah, no, you led me to it. Why did you call it Musket?
Oh, have you got enough time for this? I don't know. So it was... so look, it's very much sort of my own personal thinking on this. I think Saifedean's written some things about this. I think a couple of other people in the space have. I must admit, I actually haven't read their thesis on this, but the more that I reflect, I spend quite a lot of time looking at historical precedents for things. Where has this happened before? inspired a lot by revolutionary activities. So, what happened in the American Revolution, the English Civil War, what times in it throughout history when this sort of the status quo has been challenged, and on what basis has it been challenged, and why? What drove those people to be so discontented with how things were operating, to try and bring out a different system? What was their ideology? Were they complete lunatics, or were they just were they actually the good guys, and were they trying to stop repression and oppression? So it was just I was genuinely just reflecting on the American Revolution and the French Revolution, all these other things, and it struck me that the big balancing factor throughout history is gunpowder. And I think people have probably spoken about this in a more eloquent way than I can. But in my mind, gunpowder has been the thing that has been adopted by groups, societies, countries as a technology of force, and has then gone on to be something that's been used to conquer other civilizations and other societies. And I was thinking about it, we needed a snappier name and something that was more revolutionary and aligned with our vision. And for me, Bitcoin represents gunpowder, sort of a pile of gunpowder that on its own can do serious damage. You set light to that, there's some big explosions. But maybe what's cuter about gunpowder is if you put it in a musket, you put it and you channel that energy and that explosive power, and you use that with more strategic objectives, then actually you can do things, either defend your own rights, as you saw, sort of, to take the analogy probably too far, but during the Wild West days, people wanted to build a homestead. The only thing protecting them was them, a bit of gunpowder and a gun. And they had all kinds of threats to protect themselves against in those days. Whereas, metaphorically here, I'm thinking actually, what I really like the idea of us representing is a check and balance on the current system, a check and balance on government overreach, and an ability that is say, look, we are friendly as far as until you push us too far. And if you push us too far, we have the capability to say, actually, there is another way around this. You can't control what we spend, where we go, what we do. There are basic human freedoms that need to be defended, and I think the sort of the name and iconography of the old school muskets and gunpowder seem to sort of work quite well. I'm not in any way advocating usage of it, so please call off the lawyers, and I don't want any police at my door, thanks. But yeah, it was more sort of a reflection on what has changed throughout history, and I think if this is just a payments business trying to do something slightly different and insert Bitcoin as an alternative payments method, there's not really the people out there that can do that, right? There's not really much point doing what we're doing. But actually, if we wrap it up in a bigger picture of ideology, and we say, well, this is step one, accepting Bitcoin payments and giving people the ability to transact freely in it, is step one. And then we build out a broader suite of services that incorporates that, so that then eventually maybe people never have to sell their Bitcoin, and we can integrate with a Debify or someone of that ilk, where you can collateralize your Bitcoin that you as a business owner have taken, and now you hold on your balance sheet, and you can use that collateralized loan to expand your business or pay some OPEX costs that you may have, or even lend against it. So I think we very much see the end state of this being a broader Bitcoin financial services business, or a Bitcoin services business rather. Starts with payments. Payments needs to work to fulfill the objectives of it. But really, if we haven't made Bitcoin a medium of exchange and ushered in hyper Bitcoinization, then the job's not done.
Mm. Adrian, last question, and then I'll ask you all the flagship final question. When it comes to raising money and getting investment, obviously you've been around this game for a very long time, as you've explained. Do you think original, like mainstream venture capitalists are going to be drawn to this particularly now, because it's a two-pronged attack, right? Any original investor looking at this, VC, is just another payments network. You're like, no, just another payments network with this whole thing built on top of it as well, which is going to give the merchant the ability to market themselves as being able to accept Bitcoin, this just completely changes the shape of the landscape.
Yeah, I think VCs wouldn't normally invest in a payments company of this nature if it were just a vanilla flavor copy of everything else that's out there. It's a long, hard road. Although you can make some very good returns out of payments businesses, it's the nature of these things that they generate a lot of cash, which is good news if you're an investor. But the USP that David's bringing to the market is valuable, and it is, you know, it's interesting in talking to investors in this space. Their questions are related to how solid is the foundation. Well, the foundation is card payments, and there's a real potential in that space. And then their next question is, but what makes you think you're going to be able to sell where other people have failed to sell and grow a business? And that's where Bitcoin absolutely comes in. And we have evidence, for example, that Bitcoin acceptance can increase a merchant's turnover by 2%. Adding 2% to a merchant's business is you know, gold dust these days. It's really hard out there.
Whilst cutting the fees at the same time.
Whilst cutting their fees. So for a VC, this is a message of de-risked growth, taking them into a huge area of opportunities. So I think, you know, the reception that David gets when we're pitching, and you know, I've done it in my career. It's a jolly hard business raising money. I think the reception is really strong, and the more we move into growing a solid revenue base of the business, whilst delivering on that message that David's just described of making Bitcoin deliver on all the hopes we have for it. That's a strong message for an investor.
Is the plan to get more investment on the table now, or try and get some revenue coming in? And, you know, how are you guys looking at it? If somebody picked up the phone after this podcast, you know, what's kind of the feel in-house?
Yeah, so we've been pushing hard to close the round. The round itself was not huge. It was 750K on a 2 million pre-money. So, you know, chunky old equity dilution, but that's us recognizing just how tough the market is right now to raise funds. So we're sort of saying, look, again, ideologically driven. So we'd rather see that this is live and operating rather than not. But we're halfway through that round at the moment. Well, it's slightly over halfway through. We have a few well-known entities, I'm happy to let you know offline, who we're in discussion with at the moment. So we're setting up, I think it's going live this week. So where are we? End of April now. It should be live this week on Angel List in the US. So that's through a third party who's leading the investment to help us close the final amount of funds, which is just over 300K. And you know, those funds really help us grow. They go towards completing a lot of the engineering work, but that's the firepower to mobilize the crowd and pay those incentives to people onboarding merchants. So our first step right now is close the round and grow aggressively. We need to get the merchants through the door, and we need to demonstrate just how much fun it is accepting Bitcoin payments and get some virality on the social media waves. You know, because we've gone a bit serious and dark and gloomy on this podcast sometimes, but you know, actually, there is a lot of excitement to be had. You know, we've got a nice custom graphic of a Bitcoin logo exploding out of a black hole in space on the device that is a payment success screen. So yeah, there's nice virality to be had. So our challenge is growth. Whether you're a small business or whether you're an online e-commerce business doing 100 million plus, we can service you, and we have partnership integrations with EPOS providers as well. So we don't have the hardware ourselves. But if you're, you know, a restaurant, a business, and you have a till system, we can integrate with that, or hook you up with one of our partners who can provide perhaps a better, more attractive deal as well. So yeah, there's benefit for merchants, investors. This first round hopefully closes and gives us at least 12 months runway. In 12 months, the question will be whether we've hit enough revenue to then sort of survive without further dilution, I don't approach this as a typical Silicon Valley continually raise and dilute, because I just don't believe in that model particularly. I think I'd rather see a business succeed on its own merits and hard work, and not dilute and be growing because it's got organic growth. But it may well be that we need a growth round in about a year's time that helps us launch into new markets. It's eye-watering how much we need to spend on lawyers and regulators to make sure that we're able to operate in both, even just the EU, or sorry, within the EU borders, so Europe and other markets. So I think that's where we would allocate some of our additional funding. So growing in those countries, and sort of seeing that explosive J curve or hockey curve sort of throughout 2025 is what we would target.
Is there anything stopping you? So, once the round is closed, say you raise the 750 grand, is there anything stopping you putting X amount of that into Bitcoin to extend your runway?
As far as I'm aware, no. There's a limit. My accountants are actually writing a piece right now just on all of the considerations a business needs to take if they're accepting Bitcoin from an accountant and tax perspective. We do have that strategy as well. So our own treasury is partially allocated. We have people on the payroll that only accept Bitcoin as payment, so we have to cater for those people. So as far as is feasible, we do have our own internal Bitcoin strategy. It's probably not advisable, Dan, to sort of take a punt on Bitcoin going to the moon and allocating investor funds, but I will allocate the funds that we need to pay bills. And if there's a 2-week period where those increase, then fantastic. We're in a better position. But I think we're in a phase where we need to be very prudent, very careful, and we need to have a very clear line of sight between funds accepted and revenue generated. So just got to make sure that every pound works for us.
The way I was thinking about it, just coming across my mind, you're obviously going to have a certain amount in the pot to pay out to the referrals, and you're nowhere near paying out referrals yet, but you might be in 6 to 9 months' time. So whatever that number might be, take that percentage and perhaps park it in Bitcoin. But again, you're going to have to clear that with the people that are parting with the cash in the first place, right? And make sure that the investors would be happy for you to put a certain amount aside in the pot in Bitcoin. But you and I both know, and certainly Ben probably even more, what's going to happen in the next year or so. It could be an incredible growth strategy, and save you from ever diluting again.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think in many ways I would love to close the round and say, look, we denominate strategically in Bitcoin now, for better or worse, and we only pay our suppliers and team in Bitcoin, again, for better or worse. And that may well work in our favor or not. So I think we need to strike the right balance. We will be doing that to an extent, but it's we certainly don't have an approach to misuse investor funds. But you're absolutely right. It feels like we're facing a situation where to me it feels like Bitcoin was around about sort of 18K in 2020. I think it had popped its head above or very close to the previous all-time high, and then spent a few weeks sort of below it. And I think it went on that run from 18K up to 69K. But to an extent, we avoid conversations about price appreciation because it's about medium of exchange. So it's part of it, and it's part of the reason and the discussion why a merchant might accept Bitcoin and hold their funds in Bitcoin. But yeah, we try not to speculate as much as possible.
All right. Last question for each of you. Ben, I know you've faced it before, but if you had one last orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give it to and why?
So it's always an interesting question. I think my answer probably changes each time I'm asked it. So at this point in time, I would probably say Bill Gates, because he completely doesn't understand Bitcoin or the reasons behind it. And if I'm talking orange pilling somebody, it doesn't just mean getting them to accept Bitcoin. It means getting them to accept the why. And somebody with his influence and power and capabilities, if he understood the why, he would be a very different person than he is. And I think somebody with his power could do a lot with that, as opposed to what he's doing now, which I'm not such a fan of.
Excellent. Adrian or David, who's ready?
Adrian, you go.
I guess I think I'd probably give it to my children, because I think that they are open to change, and they do understand enough about the world to see the value, and young people can really be advocates for change in a way that it doesn't matter what governments do. They will adopt and engage and evangelize for something. So whilst they don't have Bill Gates's money, and there's only two of them, they could be a good starting point for a lot of change in the world. So yeah, I'd give it to my kids.
Love it. Are you just crazy old dad at the moment to them? Like, what's he going on about this time, or another payment scheme?
I'm
like,
full-time crazy old dad all the time for them on every subject. That's my role. And they thankfully have a mind of their own, and I just try and nudge them to look at things differently, and they often then take on those things and get interested in them. So I'd love them to understand the potential of Bitcoin, and also the challenges of fiat currencies and the way they've been managed, especially in the last 80 years. So I'm not, I'd love them to understand it and embrace it, because when young people get hold of something, it changes the world. And we see that with social media. We can see that with all sorts of things.
Perfect. All right, David.
So I'm going to sort of go in the middle. I'm going to go for the same approach with social media reach. It was a close tie. It's a close one between Elon Musk, Kim Kardashian, Cristiano Ronaldo, but I've settled on the final one for similar reasons as Adrian. I think I'm going to go with Mr. Beast, a man who I did not know who he was. Don't know what that is, and yeah, it turns out my eldest, who's 9, quite enjoys his fun videos on YouTube. I can't remember how many viewers he has or subscribers, something around about 25 million maybe. So I think, when we're talking about orange pilling, the caveat is, though, Dan, if we're orange pilling someone like that, it's not just buy Bitcoin, it's the full rabbit hole experience that they then impart on those their sort of loyal armies of followers, because then you've got massive reach, global change, people understanding what it is, why it's important, why it matters. So I will settle with the YouTube Fiat approach for now.
Yeah, I love it, mate. He'd be able to reach a lot more people than just 4 crazy old dads sitting on a random podcast, right? Talking about Bitcoin.
Well, you're not even recording this, are you? This has just been a nice chat. Just
yeah. Right. How can people get hold of you if they are? So this is UK based primarily at the moment with bigger vision. You might want to get in contact if you're an investor, or you might want to get in contact if you live in the UK and you want to sign up to the affiliate program and do the pleb work, get on the ground, orange pill your butchers, your bakers, your candlestick makers, your pubs, your cafes, your restaurants. Why wouldn't you? Like literally, why wouldn't you do that? Especially if you can get a payout on the back end and save your favorite businesses some money and improve their business and protect their business and keep them on your high street. I mean, it's just win, 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 which is what Bitcoin does all the time, whatever it touches. So yeah, what's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, we're all very available on Twitter. So the main Twitter account is Muscat_Bitcoin. I'm Muscat_David. Ben is, I'm not sure your handle, Ben. We need a musket in front of it.
Yeah, I don't have a musket one, but Ben_Duval. So
yeah, I'll put it all in the
yeah, hello@muscat.tech as well. If you want to email us, or if you don't want anything public, then I'm on Telegram as well, Muscat_David. So please do reach out whether you've got questions, feedback. yeah, we're here.
Love it. Well, thank you all for your time this morning, guys. Thank you for everything that you're doing for Bitcoin and building something that I believe has got the potential to make a huge difference here. So yeah, well done to all of you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Cheers, Dan.
Take care.